What you know, alibiers. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Thursday, March 27th. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. We are going to catch up on a few of the cases that we've been covering, and we're going to start with former Sheriff Mickey Stines, who was accused of shooting Judge Kevin Mullins in the judge's chambers, which was caught on video. The sheriff is planning to use the insanity defense or extreme emotional disturbance. So, what would happen if a jury finds he acted out of extreme emotional disturbance? Well, he couldn't be convicted of murder. It would be a conviction of first-degree manslaughter or a lesser crime, and it would also take the possibility of receiving the death penalty off the table. The state has ordered a mental health evaluation for the sheriff. Now, we know that Sheriff Stines was involved in a civil suit regarding one of his deputies, Ben Fields. And that revolved around Deputy Fields having sex with women who were out on bond. And in exchange, they would not have to pay that monthly monitoring fee that if you don't pay, you go back to jail. Sheriff Stines had just given his deposition days before the murder, and the defense has said that deposition would be critical in their case. He testified in what is being called a tense deposition, where he was accused of not properly supervising his deputy. The female who was part of the civil suit said she did not want to go along with this, but also couldn't afford the monitoring fee and didn't want her bail to be revoked and have to go back to jail. A second woman came forward saying that she also would have sex with Ben Fields in his car because he would threaten to revoke her bond if she didn't. We know some of the contact happened in Judge Mullins' chambers, but at the time there were no cameras in the judge's chambers. Those were put in after all of these allegations were public. Now, Ben Fields pleaded guilty, obviously was fired, and he was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Sheriff Stines' attorney said in a court filing the sheriff intends to present expert evidence relating to a mental disease or defect or mental condition bearing on the issue of guilt and punishment. The Daily Mail posted an article a couple of days ago, and they quoted from a filing from the defense attorney. The defense attorney said Sheriff Stines feared that backlash from his deposition testimony caused him to fear that his or his family's lives were in danger, and Sheriff Stines' mental health was affected by the perceived threat related to him giving his deposition. His attorney said, quote, ultimately, he was in fear for the safety of his wife and daughter. And I think what you see there is the result of that, end quote. It's been reported that when he was arrested, Stines said they're trying to kidnap my wife and kid. He also said there was possibly more that would indicate Stines was not criminally responsible for the shooting, but the attorney did not elaborate. I think we all know this is not going to trial soon. Not only did Sheriff Stines waive his right to a speedy trial, but the prosecution has said it could take an additional 4 to 6 months to get all of the discovery and also to do any analysis or testing of any potential evidence. Moving on to Kouri Richins. A couple of weeks ago, we went over the motion to suppress the walk the dog letter. The judge ruled that 5 sentences in that letter were protected under attorney-client privilege, and those will not come in at trial, but the rest of the letter can. He also denied her motion to suppress the electronics. Moving on to Donna Adelson. She had a hearing on Tuesday, a case management hearing. This was regarding the defense investigator. The judge ruled that the conflict of interest is still there since this investigator worked with Donna's former attorney, Dan Rashbaum. The judge said his concern is if the conflict bleeds over, it could compromise the trial. And the point of stopping the trial the first time around was not to have to do this a second time. He ruled the investigator is off her case. They also talked about wealth evidence. If Donna was involved in the offer of money regarding the relocation of the children, that evidence would be permitted in a general sense as it relates to presenting evidence on motive. The judge will not allow anything specific like Donna's net worth on any given day to come in. Now, the defense has filed 2 new motions in limine and said they have 7 more motions they want to file in the coming weeks regarding the admissibility of evidence. The judge allowed depositions to go past the deadline of April 30th due to scheduling conflicts. One of the new motions the defense filed is the defendant's renewed motion in limine regarding the storyline of Wendi Adelson's book. Let's skim through this filing. Prior defense counsel moved to prohibit the state from questioning Wendi Adelson about the storyline of her book, This Is Our Story. On September 6, 2024, the court denied this prong of the April 12, 2024 motion in limine, ruling that the state could use the storyline for purposes of impeachment. They renewed their objection as additional facts were not previously known or addressed. During the August 30th, 2024 hearing, the state argued, I think in reference to the book. This one I kind of flip-flopped on because I went back and looked at how it came up last time, which was Wendi Adelson denied wanting to relocate, denied being disappointed about losing her motion in court to relocate, and this is, of course, the state's theory as the main motive behind this crime was she was wanting to relocate to South Florida. I thought at the time testimony opened the door to her having written a clearly autobiographical book about a woman just like herself, married to a man just like Dan Markel, who's utterly miserable and stuck in the place she's living in. So, if the testimony goes that way this time, I can imagine a scenario where I might want to ask about that. The filing goes on to say that the petition for divorce between Wendi and Dan was September 10th, 2012. The motion for temporary relocation and the amended petition adding the count for relocation was filed on January 14th, 2013. The petition for relocation was denied June 18th. The book was originally published on September 15th, 2011. Even assuming the storyline for Wendi's book is an autobiography, how Wendi felt about being stuck in Tallahassee at the time she wrote the book isn't relevant to how she felt after the petition for relocation was denied or during the time of the alleged conspiracy. Significantly, the state's assertion that the main character of the book was utterly miserable and stuck in the fictional city runs directly counter to how the book concluded. Presumably, Wendi did not start writing this book in September 2011. Rather, it is significantly more logical. Wendi wrote the book over a period of time which concluded in September of 2011, making it even more remote in time to the denial of her petition for relocation. As a result, even if marginally relevant, it does not survive a Florida statute's analysis, and its probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice, confusion of issues, or misleading the jury. They asked the judge to grant the motion in limine and prohibit the state from questioning Wendi Adelson about the storyline of her book. This is the subject of the hearing today. If the judge rules, I will let you guys know, most likely on a YouTube short, and then I'll cover it on an episode later this week. Moving on to Lori Daybell. You guys know Lori has put our buddy Nate Eaton from East Idaho News on the witness list, and Nate is firing back. He filed an emergency motion with the court asking to be taken off Lori's witness list. It says, Nate Eaton, appearing pro se, files this emergency motion for protective order requesting the court strike his name from the witness list of the defendant, Lori Daybell, pursuant to Arizona rules of criminal procedure or any other applicable law or rule as follows. I have learned that I've been identified as a potential witness by Mrs. Daybell for both cases in Arizona. I'm a reporter for East Idaho News, and I have no knowledge of information regarding the crimes which Mrs. Daybell has been accused. My involvement in any matter related to Mrs. Daybell has been only as a reporter. It is my understanding that by simply listing me as a potential witness, I can be barred from the courtroom during Mrs. Daybell's trials. This seems to be a clear attempt by Mrs. Daybell to use the rules of criminal procedure as a pretext simply to keep me out of the courtroom and interfere with my ability to report. Such an effort clearly interferes with my First Amendment rights as a reporter and the First Amendment rights of my employer to view and report on the events of the trial in the same manner as any other member of the media. Thus, listing me as a witness results in harm far outweighing any claimed usefulness. There is no legitimate usefulness to list me as a witness. Further, that risk of harm cannot be eliminated by a less substantial restriction of discovery rights, as it is not the disclosure of my identity that is harmful, but the abuse of the rules of criminal procedure to list me as a witness in order to interfere with my constitutionally protected rights and duties. Therefore, I respectfully request the court deny or strike Mrs. Daybell's attempt to list me as a potential witness. I'm keeping an eye out for a ruling on that, and I'll let you know when one comes down. Go get her, Nate. Lastly, Bryan Kohberger. There was a state's reply to the defendant's objection to the state's motion in limine regarding the admissibility of demonstrative exhibits. The state says, at the outset, it is necessary for the state to clarify the history between the parties on the issue of a 3D model. It is true that the state's initial plan was to ask for a 2-scale 3D model of the 1122 King Road residence. Eventually, the state realized there was not any need for a 2-scale model and ultimately settled on proposing a not 2-scale 3D model as a demonstrative or illustrative exhibit. They refer to a chain of emails between the state and the defense, and they go on to say the state respectfully submits that a not-to-scale illustrative model is no different than a diagram or a hand-drawn sketch or a floor plan. They list an exhibit that was presented to the grand jury in this case. The state recognizes that it will need to establish a foundation that the 3D model fairly depicts or represents the floor plan of 1122 King Road on November 13th, 2022, and that the use of the model will be helpful to witnesses in explaining their testimony and to the jury in understanding the evidence. Based on the above, the state asked the court to issue an order allowing the use of a not-to-scale 3D model of the 1122 King Road residence in order to aid witnesses in their testimony and aid the jury in understanding the evidence provided. Of course, that the state lays adequate foundation for said exhibit. There is another filing where we see a list of evidence the state plans to use. On this list, there were some things they wrote they do not plan to use anymore. I'm not going to get into the legal arguments, but this is a filing for self-authenticating records rather than calling a witness to have to lay foundation. So what is on this list that they are currently planning to use? 1320 Linda Lane surveillance footage from November 13th, 2022. It shows the suspect vehicle in the area of the crime scene at 3:29 a.m. 1330 Linda Lane. Between 3:30 and 4:07 a.m., it shows the suspect vehicle traveling in the area of the crime scene. Albertsons, which is a grocery store, surveillance from November 13th, 12:46 to 1:06 p.m. It shows the defendant's vehicle and actions hours after the homicides. Amazon financial and user records for Bryan Kohberger. Details about Bryan's subscription information and order history from January 5th, 2022 to December 13th, 2022. AT&T phone records for Bryan, Maddie, and Xana. For Bryan, the record dates are from November 12th through the 14th of 2022 and June 23rd, 2022 through December of 2022. Next up is Xana and Maddie's call detail records. Then we have a bagel shop video surveillance from November 13th between 1:40 and 2 a.m. This evidence provides a timeline of events for Kaylee and Maddie before the homicides, and it also corroborates state witness testimony. Bank of America records for one of the surviving roommates as well as Xana. Cafe Artista, November 13th, 1:40 a.m., provides a timeline of events for Kaylee and Maddie before the homicides. Corner Club video surveillance, November 12th at 10:20 p.m. through November 13th, 2022 at approximately 1:37 a.m. and again provides a timeline of events for Kaylee and Maddie. They're also going to use transaction receipts from the Corner Club to provide that timeline. Details student records regarding Bryan to show the defendant's knowledge of crime scenes. They did attach this paper Bryan wrote about crime scenes. I will read that in full on a separate episode. Dick's Sporting Goods record of sale for Bryan. The relevance of this information is that Bryan purchased a black balaclava from Dick's Sporting Goods on January 10th, 2022. This mask is the same type of mask described by DM that she witnessed worn by a male in the residence at the time of the murders. Next up, discover financial records for Kaylee. Then we have DoorDash records for Xana regarding a delivery to 1122 King Road on November 13th at 3:59 a.m. This evidence provides a timeline of events for Xana before the homicides. E&S Services surveillance from November 13th, 2022 at 5:26 a.m. shows the suspect vehicle after the homicides in Pullman, Washington. They gave Bryan Kohberger a copy of this from the grand jury materials. Floyd's Cannabis Company surveillance footage from the 13th at around 3:02 a.m. It shows a white sedan on State Route 270 between Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho, approximately 1 hour before the homicides. Crypto.com, or now known as Forrest Dax, I hope I pronounced that right, is financial records for Bryan Kohberger. The Grub truck surveillance from November 13th from approximately 1:43 to 1:53 a.m. Pacific time. This provides a timeline of events for Kaylee and Maddie before the homicides. Sheriff's Office Deputy Darren Duke's body cam video on August 21st, 2022, as well as the citation Bryan got with that traffic stop. National Weather Service records for November 12th and 13th, 2022. By the way, I looked, it was cloudy. They're clearly going to point out that it's not the best time to go stargazing if it's cloudy. PayPal and Venmo financial records for Bryan. PNC bank records and Pennsylvania State Employees Credit Union for Bryan. The state has provided specifics regarding the relevance of this information in the state's expert disclosure. Sunset Mart, November 13th, approximately 0.5 miles from 1122 King Road at 3:28 a.m., shows the suspect vehicle in the area of the crime scene prior to the homicides. TikTok records for Xana. It would show Xana on the TikTok app November 13th at approximately 3:16 a.m. Pacific time. T-Mobile phone records for Kaylee and roommate DM from November 13th, 2022. This evidence provides a timeline of events for Kaylee and roommate DM before the homicides. U.S. Chef Store in Clarkston, Washington. Video surveillance from November 13th. The state may rely on video footage from approximately 12:42 to 12:44 p.m. to show defendant's vehicle and actions hours after the homicides. The Washington Department of Motor Vehicles surveillance video for November 18th, as well as registration documents for Bryan Kohberger. Washington Trust Bank records and images for Bryan. Washington State University video surveillance, November 13th, from approximately 5:28 to 5:30 a.m., showing the suspect vehicle after the homicides in Pullman, Washington. And lastly, Washington State University parking records that show Bryan's Hyundai Elantra was registered in the system and he had an active permit at Washington State University. So that's it for this episode. If anything major happens at Donna's hearing today, I may do an episode. If not, I'll update you guys on a YouTube short. So be sure you're subscribed over there. And if you want notifications, each time I post new content, click that little bell icon and don't forget to give the video a like. All right. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.